So we are live right now, but it's funny because as much as we're live right now, it doesn't. I find that the actual recording afterwards starts like 10 to 15 seconds after. So
Yeah.
whenever I do like a proper intro, it always cuts it off, and so that's why I feel no problem discussing this with you beforehand before I go into the intro because it's all liveness. So all right. Mini Wargamer Dave here from miniwargaming.com. Welcome, Wargamers, to the Shrine of Chaos. Today we have a very special guest. Today we have Carl Tuttle of the Independent Characters podcast. He is the largest, if one of the largest, if not the largest podcaster for 40K out there. I know from what I know of you, Carl, it's been you've always been, in my mind, you're the largest podcaster, and that's actually interesting because I find that podcasters in general, and then wargaming podcasters on top of that, they don't really share their numbers too much, and so it's like, how does one even gauge that? How does one know?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of
It's a
a
mystery.
feel. Yeah, it's a mystery. I mean, look, we've been around for 10 years.
Yeah.
We did take a short break where I thought I was quitting, and apparently I was the only one that, didn't realize I wasn't quitting. Like even my wife was like, "Oh yeah, you were gonna restart this at some point." But we have been around a long time. We have, it's probably some name recognition, as you look around and you have, Google alerts and those things set up, like you see how things relate to other things. There are lots of popular podcasts out there that service lots of different approaches to the hobby and approaches to the content that they're doing. But ours seems to resonate with people that have a really positive outlook for the hobby and for the game itself. So I really, our focus is around just trying the game in a bunch of different ways and enjoying yourself.
That's something I've noticed as well. It's you focus on the fun of the hobby. It's I've never seen anything like negatively clickbaity, ranting. Nothing of that sort. It's always just check this out. This is fun. Check out this lore thing. It's always like that, which is, I think, in my mind, like in my opinion, it's really what it should be.
And it does draw that group, right? So we have a super supportive group of listeners and people that are active in our Facebook group and our Patreon and all that stuff. But it's because, we put that, it's as goofy as it sounds, like you put that energy out there and that's the energy you're going to get back.
100%.
And back when we started the show, it was my original podcast partner, Jeff, and myself. We started the show. We wanted to avoid things like rants and all the negativity, because it was just like, yeah, everybody else is doing that, and we want to go our own direction here. So we were not tournament players, and so what can we really offer? Strategy coming from me is about driving backwards, right? So I'm and so we said, well, what can we bring to the hobby? Like, we knew we wanted to do this podcast, and we thought, we heard certain podcasts out there, and we thought we can do something better than that, something we want to listen to.
Yeah.
And so we said, well, what can we do? Well, how about we try to make people, we have a large gaming group of friends that enjoy the hobby and the lore and everything about it. Mm-hmm. What if we try to make people feel like a part of that gaming group? Yeah. And that would be kind of our and it just kind of organically became our tagline.
Right.
And it's been fantastic. It's been absolutely fantastic. The response we've received. It's bigger. The show is bigger than I ever anticipated. I mean, I was really naive when I look back 10 years ago. I was really, really naive about it. I never really considered that there's an international audience. Like, I kind of figured, oh, maybe the UK and the US. But then when you start seeing South Africa and, Eastern Europe and all Japan and all these places, and you're like, oh, I didn't even think about it. And I work in the internet. I should have known,
Yeah. No, totally. 100%. Yeah. Where are you based out of?
So we're based out of the Bay Area of California, which led to another point of, we're not trying to do any breaking news or anything. Everybody on the East Coast in England gets all this information 3 hours at minimum before we do. So really our focus was just go against the grain there. Yeah. So we're out in the West Coast. We have an amazing hobby community in this area. It's incredibly robust. There are a lot of players, to the point where people find out we're in this area and they're like, "Oh, can I come join your group?" And we're like, we got to be kind of selective about it because we just get so many inquiries about it. And so, we have a method of introducing people to the group outside the group, and then kind of ease them in if we think it's a good fit.
Yeah, makes sense. And we have a mutual friend, don't we?
I think several, but one in particular.
Yeah,
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, yes.
He'd be upset if we didn't mention his name.
he might be. Yeah, we might be afterwards. Hey, Doug, do you see the podcast interview? Yeah. Oh, which one? The one I wasn't mentioned in?
Yeah, that's a good impression of Doug, actually. Doug is from Southern California. Well, not originally, but that's where he's based out of. And early on, when I was doing the show, we were supported by KR Multicase at the time.
Okay.
And I kind of had an exclusivity agreement with them at that time. This was early on when we were taking on advertisers. Mm-hmm. And Doug had approached me and said, "Hey, I sell these cases," and he and I actually have a mutual friend as well in the video game industry.
Oh, cool.
And I really want to, advertise on your show. And I'm like, I can't, And so for a couple years, Doug kind of constantly pursued me on that and gave me a hard time until we finally separated from our exclusivity agreement and explained to our current advertiser, well, this is a very different product and it kind of serves a different need. And he was like, yeah, I'm good with it. And so we brought them on as an advertiser. And now, to be honest, like, they're just an advertiser because they're our friends. We don't really charge them. I really believe in their products. I think they're great guys. Doug and Todd are some, two of my closest friends.
Yeah. And
I adore those guys. And we did we had a huge fire out here a couple years ago.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
And it just burnt down a town, Paradise, California, just burnt to the ground. Nuts. And Doug and Todd donated just so much stuff to the efforts that we did to get those gamers back on their feet. It was incredibly generous for a small company.
Yeah.
It's brutal.
They're incredibly generous. I agree. Yeah. And so Table War, I mean, that's this interview podcast is not sponsored by Table War, but we just happen to be talking about them.
Yeah, and I was not trying to really just promote them. They're just really good friends, and they're good people, and it's a good company, and it's something like that I always support.
Yeah, So, and it's funny because he came here, he visited me, and one of these studios that we have is actually, he helped design one of them, and it's Necromunda themed, and there's this we made this 3D printed hubcap. Kind of like cog bolt plate that we made. We put on the wall, and he graphically designed one of the images that I had printed out on a huge canvas. It was 14-foot canvas.
He's a graphic designer. He's an artist, actually. Some of his paintings incredible.
He's very talented. I saw some of his paintings in addition to what he does for the fat mats. I mean, that's just kind of like his everyday stuff. But so he came up when we opened the bunker a year ago. And we did a campaign, just he and I did a Blood Angels versus Orcs campaign. It was a lot of fun.
I watched it.
You watched the campaign?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, sweet.
I had to. Otherwise, you think you watched the video? I was supposed to come out there this year, but COVID.
That's right. Yeah, and I guess that's where I was going with this, right? Like, I mean, it's as soon as the borders open, it's certainly an open invitation for you to come up and
I'll do it.
And you know what? I think it would only be appropriate that we do a narrative campaign,
of course,
because, well, first and foremost, that's kind of what I like to do anyway.
Same here.
And it's very fitting with you because you're when I think of lore and I think of channels associated with lore, you're certainly one of the channels that I think of, and kind of getting rich into like the world, the universe, when it comes to 40K. So.
And it's funny when I started this game, clueless. I had no clue. I started with Marines, as most people do, and I was making my own chapter, or what I thought I was doing, and I remember a friend of mine saying, "Oh well, this Rogel Dorn is the Primarch of Imperial Fists," and I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. Not a clue. I think it was really the Black Library novels that kind of sucked me into that piece, and then the Forge World stuff. Once the Forge World stuff, like the Imperial Armor books they used to put out, were just that was it sealed the deal for me. So
So,
now I'm super deep into it.
all right. So, getting into that for a second, you're a chaos player,
Yeah,
uh, and now that's kind of broad. So,
yeah.
what kind of a chaos player are you?
Well, primarily Tzeentch, so Thousand Suns and Tzeentch Demons. But my kind of long term ongoing project is really Black Legion.
Okay.
And that's quite frankly because of Aaron Dembski Bowden's novels, Talon of Horus and Black Legion, which are just, I think, the best two novels ever put out by Black Library. And that's not, I'm not being, pedantic there. Like I think that is, I think they're just incredible novels. I very much related to them. But then again, and I'm, truth be told, I'm, all transparency. I'm friends with Aaron, but I'm also friends with John French. And
Okay.
so he wrote all the Ahriman books, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I really like Thousand Suns, and and occasionally if I drop one project and go to another, they're like, what's up? So, but I love both those guys, and so his writing really inspired me to do Black Legion.
Yeah.
Previously I had an Ultramarines army, and a lot of people are like, well, the Ultramarines are kind of the poster boys of the Marines, and then you have Black Legion, which are kind of the poster boys of the Chaos Forces. And I'm like, that's okay by me. I don't have a problem with that. I think they're really cool. So
I couldn't agree more actually about those two specific books. And because I read, or I didn't read them, I listened to them audiobooks.
yeah.
Right? That's
It's fantastic too.
so much better with Jonathan Keeble, I think is his
Yeah.
name.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Fantastic job narrating and doing the voices. But I actually did it in reverse. I did Black Legion first, then I listened to the Talon of Horus, which when I listened to Black Legion, I didn't even know the Talon of Horus was a thing, like was an audiobook that I could listen to.
Right.
So when I went back, it's like,
oh, now this makes sense.
yeah, now that makes sense. So, that's why he's there. And
he does such a great job of interlacing not only the character development, but like humor. And it's so funny. I mean, a lot of people read those books and they're like, oh, this guy's amazing, or this character is a total screw up. And he's like, that's the point. Like they are, these are not people you want to emulate. Like these are villains, right? These are, it's just so funny. There's a lot of really intricate detail to his writing. And I think Aaron would tell you he's probably one of the slowest writers in the Black Library arsenal of authors. And it's because he's so perfectionist with that piece of it. It's the same thing with his painting models, like he never finishes a whole thing because he just focuses on the perfection. Me, completion is a perfection in itself. So. But yeah, I mean, but there's so much detail and they're so rich, and I love them. Yeah, I'm like you. I was hooked. Can't wait for the next one.
Do you recall I think it was the Talon of Horus, when Abaddon was meeting with, there was a bunch of, for lack of a better title, a bunch of Chaos Marines, but it wasn't. It was an amalgamation of different characters. And he showed them.
They're all kind of subservient to him at that point.
Yeah, I think they were.
Or is this when first meeting them? I don't want to do any spoilers, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and this doesn't necessarily spoil the book because it happens like in the middle, and it's just a small detail. But the detail is that he shows them respect.
Yeah,
and he even showed them that he knew personal details about them because they remember things forever. And because of that, because he showed this respect to them, they had this deep respect back for him. And I think that scene in the book, I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about, but if it sounds familiar.
It's just prior to him actually showing him the Talon, the actual Talon itself.
It's
in the...
It could be. I don't recall exactly where it is. I just remember that there's this group of guys, and he was showing them a lot of respect, and they in turn respected him even more because of that. And I think that scene really helped to humanize Abaddon for me, because before, just playing the game and like, oh, Abaddon, he's this villain, he wants to kill everything Imperium, and he's on his crusades, and like that's how he was to me. He was very black and white, right? But by listening to these books, you really see that he cares very much for his his brothers, right? So it's
but he'll use them.
But he'll use them at the same time.
I think the interesting thing, and the thing that Aaron did well with that character, is he goes from, his father, Horus, is tricked into chaos, right?
Yeah.
He has stabbed with the anathema dagger or whatever it's called, and he falls to chaos because he's fooled into falling for chaos. Abaddon is very aware of what chaos is. He's embracing it on his terms.
Yeah.
And going into it with his eyes wide open.
Right.
I know exactly what this is. And, and so in a way that makes him way more dangerous than Horus ever was. And a lot of people like to, fail Abaddon, and, he failed 13 Crusades. And yeah, of course we're retconning that, because I think that was, some 80s, bit. Oh, well, he's been on 13 Crusades, because 13 sounds like a bad number, right? And and so what they've done is kind of say, well, each of those Crusades were really to achieve a specific objective, and and so when people are like, oh, well, he still failed, I'm like, he split the galaxy in half.
Yeah,
he's done more than anybody else, as far as chaos is concerned.
Yeah,
so what does success look like to you? Well, yeah, storming the Imperial Palace in Terra, and whatever, but we're getting there. We'll get there.
I think that's a pretty big feather in his cap, right?
Yeah.
But no, I those books, those two specifically, actually, because I've listened to a whole bunch since those, but the very first one was Black Legion that I listened to, and it just kind of it got me on this listening spree of all these Black Library books, and it got me into Word Bearers, because I listened to the first Heretic.
Yeah, another Aaron book. Fantastic novel.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And the thing I really enjoyed about the Horus Heresy novels, well, the great ones, are there was always some answer to something in the lore that you were like, oh, that's why X, right? But it didn't. One of the things these guys will probably tell you is, we're not going to answer every question, because that's actually not what you want. You don't want every question answered. That would be boring.
Right.
It's fun to speculate on these things and argue with each other, and and talk about this stuff. So they'll never answer everything. And in fact, I think what they're trying to do is add more questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's what Gav Thorpe said to me when I interviewed him a few weeks back. He's that exact thing. He said,
"Yeah,
we're not."
I think that's mantra.
And I mean, it's great, right? Because it's an endless supply of kind of this food.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the galaxy is big, really, really big. And this is why when people are like, well, what's happening with, this one particular character? I'm like, you realize that's one guy in bajillions of people, like, even Abaddon, right? Who's so important, really not that important. He's really not. And so it always amazed me. And I guess I'm glad they've moved the story forward a little bit.
Yeah.
But people are like, oh, well, doesn't 9th edition move the story forward more? I'm like, it's not a story, it's a setting. And they haven't explored even the smallest part of it. It's so big. They're never going to finish the story. And if we were 5 minutes to midnight before, we're now like a minute to midnight. And so advancing the story further is going to probably put an end to it. So, where do you go from there?
What do you think would be, let's say they did end the story, what do you think it would be?
The Emperor gets reborn. He's a perpetual. They just mentioned it in the White Dwarf a few months ago.
Okay.
That he's a perpetual. So that means That literally means if he is killed, if that article is correct, if he is killed, at some point he comes back. So it'd actually be probably to the benefit of mankind. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for mankind. But it does actually answer the question: is he alive on that throne or not? Because if he hasn't been reborn yet, then he must be still alive in some way, shape, or form on that throne, or kept in some state that prevents him from being reborn. Right.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know. I you know, a lot of people joke about, oh, well, then this will happen, and the Tyranids come and eat everything. I mean, I think eventually the Tyranids are going to devour everything. They're unstoppable, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so eventually, yeah, the Tyranids will win out, unless the Necrons stop and they start turning off suns or something. But the Tyranids come from another galaxy. I mean, think about that. Think about how big the galaxy is, and the millions of stars within our galaxy, and they came from another galaxy that they supposedly devoured already. So it's like, okay, you know, in the end, I think the Tyranids take it.
And maybe that's just it, right? That's the constant looming.
And the Tyranids don't care about chaos, you know. So they're like, nah, whatever.
The Tyranids care not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
That's my.
I know, but that's like. Is there anything that could actually defeat the Tyranids?
I don't think we've seen it. I mean, everything delays them, right?
Delays them, yeah.
The Imperium at its might is like, oh, burn these worlds and steer them into these orcs.
Yeah.
So that they fight these orcs, and then they just get better because they fought a bunch of orcs. So it's like, okay,
right.
You know, I mean, to me, they're actually the most horrifying of all the races. You know, because there's no negotiation, there's no reasoning with them. As much as people make fun of the whole Blood Angels and Necrons, like bro fisting thing, I mean, that's actually, we talked about that in my last episode. It's actually a really interesting story, where the Necrons and Blood Angels are battling and in this war for this planet, and the Tyranids show up, and they're like, if we don't work together to stop the Tyranids, nothing's going to be left of either of us, you know. And they defeat the Tyranids for a while, but then kind of go their separate ways. It's actually, I'm not doing the story justice. It's actually pretty interesting. I mean, like when the Blood Angels approach the Tyranids, they basically have like the equivalent of like nuclear warheads in their Rhino, and they drive up and they're like, so we want to talk, and they're with all intention of just, if this goes south, we're going to set off these warheads and just wipe out everything here. And you know, they talk to the Necron overlord, I don't remember exactly who, and it comes out and it's wearing like the face mask of Sanguinius, which is like a super insult to the Blood Angels. And but they work through this negotiation where they're like, all right, we're gonna fight, you know, but both of them are intending to betray the other at the drop of a hat, you know.
Right.
The battle just wipes them out so much that they kind of are like, now would not be a good time for me to fight these people. So I don't know. I think even at their height, they can't really stop the Tyranids in their tracks. So what's going to stop them?
Yeah.
I don't think they're yet.
You're right, though. It is terrifying. What else? Like even, is it not true that they say if the orcs actually banded together and organized themselves, that they would be the strongest threat? I've heard that too.
I think it's all speculation on everybody's part, but this is my point. They'll never answer any of these questions.
No.
Because then we can't have this conversation about it, which is a highly entertaining conversation, right? I mean, could the orcs stop the Tyranids? I suppose if they were all to get together, maybe they could, but we also don't know what's out there for the Tyranids. But the orcs just continue to spawn and put their pollen everywhere and make more orcs. So, you know.
Yeah, like they're endless too. And the more they fight, the stronger and bigger they get, right?
That's the end, where it's just an endless slaughter of orcs and Tyranids. And, you know.
Wow.
But yeah.
All right, so back to chaos for a second.
Sure.
Okay, so Black Legion. So collecting. You said it was 10 years ago you started the podcast. Is that when you started wargaming, or were you into wargaming before that?
I was into wargaming a little bit before that. And I had kind of a start-stop relationship with 40K. For me, it was, I'm huge into role-playing games. I had always been. We had a regular game every Sunday. We played for 7-8 hours. But as guys got older and had kids and families and whatnot, players would not be able to make it, and it would kind of screw up the consistency of the game. And so I was looking for something that I could play with one other person on a regular basis. And 40K had the Battle for Macragge set out at the time, and I knew about 40K. It had always been kind of a pricey game from my perspective as a younger guy with limited funds that I could spend on it. But now I had a little more money and I wanted to invest a little bit. So one of my friends was like, yeah, I'll go in halves on this box with you. And I'm interested in the Tyranids. I said, okay, I'm interested in the Space Marines.
Cool.
And away we went. And a bunch of friends came over to watch us play through like how the game worked. And then all of a sudden, all the friends were like, okay, I'm going to do this army. I'm going to do that army. And away we went. We were probably a little ambitious initially. We were just playing amongst our group. We didn't have probably this was 4th edition. We didn't have maybe the strongest grasp of the rules. And a friend of mine said, I want to run this campaign. We were probably a little too competitive initially, especially for not understanding all the rules like we should have. But, you know, when you're in a group in isolation and you're just playing the rules and you're like, well, we all think this is how this rule works. It's not until you go outside that group that you meet other people and you're like, oh, we've been playing this wrong the whole time. And so, you know, I kind of ran afoul some hurt feelings on some friends' sides over how the games were played or whatnot. It was just all silly. And so I just stepped away from it, took a break for a while, and was just getting involved in other stuff. And then kind of came back to it when the buddy that I started the show with moved to the area, and he moved from the East Coast out to here. Mm-hmm. And so we started playing, and the group kind of fired back up again, and it's been nonstop since. And so he was here for about 6-7 months, and he calls me up one day and says, hey, you know, you ever thought about doing a podcast? And I was like, dude, I was going to ask you, because I had floated the idea about doing like a role-playing game podcast around some of my friends. And one of my friends in particular can never take anything seriously. And so he made some fun of it. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess nobody wants to do it. And then lo and behold, this guy shows up, Jeff, who we were on the same page, and we start the podcast. And all of a sudden, it took a little while, but then it took off. And, you know, now who's making fun of who?
So here's a question then about your podcast.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed that, and like there's so many different formats for podcasts, and you put a considerable amount of preparation into your podcasts. And and so how did you come to that decision that would be your format?
Yeah, and the format did evolve over a period of time. So there were clearly influences, right? 40K radio at the time with Spencer doing that was the big dog on the block. Mm-hmm. And I kind of watched, and we love that show. And in fact, Jeff and I met through their forums, and we kind of watched the show deteriorate and kind of implode over a period of time. And I watched the quality of it gradually go down. Like they would do codex overviews where they have a copy of the codex and they're reading the entries to you. And I'm like, one of our first advertisements was, we don't do codex overviews on the show because, well, our listeners can read, you know, and it was kind of a dig at those guys, but we wouldn't have ever started the show if it weren't for them.
Yeah.
And Spencer was incredibly talented as a podcast host. But you know, we were like, you know, listen, we got to prepare things. If we're going to talk about something, we have to have played it, and we have to speak from at least a point of familiarity. And then what happened was we had a guy by the name of Zach join us for a while on the show. And Zach had a degree in, I think he'd done some film school stuff. And so he knew how to kind of put a organization to something. And our format for our notes changed at that point to where we were like, first we do segment 1, then we do segment 2, then segment 3. And these are roughly how long they take. And then we go back and we record the intro and record the exit, and so we know what we've talked about, so we can talk about it in the intro. And and it was like, oh, okay, this is kind of eye-opening. It was a really good thought. And then what we did was we found ourselves kind of scrambling each week to well, what should the topic of the show be this week? And so one day we just sat down and just said, let's list out like everything we ever want to talk about. And so we created this huge list of topic ideas, which we've run through, and occasionally I'll sit down for, a couple hours and just think about ideas and things that we want to talk about. And so now we work from this big, long list. Like I have shows scheduled out until November at this point.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And I mean, that moves around a little bit. I may change topics, or somebody may not, from our group, who I want to pull in because maybe they're an expert on this particular thing, may not be available. So we'll switch things up. But in general, we have a good idea of here's what's coming next and here's what we're going to do next, so that people are mentally prepared for it.
And how often?
I think it shows.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, 100%. I agree.
Yeah.
I think that level of preparation is certainly appreciated by the listener, because then there's a certain digestion of information that comes from the preparation. Whereas if it's free form, nothing against free form, but it's a different kind of.
I'm not that guy. Like, I'm not the improv guy. I'm the I have to have a plan kind of thing. And the reality is, a lot of people start podcasts and they're like, well, we like talking about 40K, so let's just record what we talk about.
Right. Like,
really, it's easy to make a podcast. It's hard to make a good podcast.
Yeah. And you were talking about some Black Library books, and I'm sure a number of your podcasts, but I think there was one in particular, which actually, did you talk about Black Legion?
Oh yeah, anytime.
Okay, so then, because there were a number of different podcasters that I listened to before I started listening to Black Library novels, and so I forget who it was. I don't know if it was one of your co-hosts or a guest on your show, but they were talking about Black Legion specifically, and Aaron Debsky Bowden, and so that actually inspired me to start listening to it.
Yeah.
And I liked how there was multiple opinions about it, and there was multiple angles and experiences. And you could tell that it was thought out.
Yeah. That
the thoughts were, there's thought behind this. It's not just, oh, how do I feel about this? And then there's an off the cuff kind of feeling about it.
Right.
It was, I know how this is how I feel about it, and this is how I'm going to present how I feel about this.
Sure. And Jeff, we used to do this segment called Forbidden Lore, which we haven't done in a long time. Other shows have done it since, which it's kind of a book club. Hey, here's the book we're going to read in the next 3 weeks. Read the book, and then we're going to have a discussion with the author about it typically. And we would bring the author in and talk about that book, spoilers and all.
Yeah.
And so people could be involved in that. And Jeff, I was like a bad version of like that Chris Farley skit on Saturday Night Live where he'd see like some star he's enamored with. And I'd be like, remember that part where Abaddon fired his bolter at that guy and his head blew up? That was cool. And Jeff would ask like these incredibly, well thought out questions like, well, at the beginning, in the prologue, the character says this, and by the time we get to the epilogue, we see that this arc has happened, and I'm just like, well, that was a really good question. Like, I liked when he shot the guy,
That's awesome.
But it helped me actually hearing Jeff ask those questions. I was like, man, I need to pay way more attention to like the prologue and where things are going. What are the underlying themes here of the story that they're trying to get across? And Aaron and John layer those themes on things, as do several of the Black Library authors, where it's not just what we used to call bolter porn, right? Or so yeah. There is a lot of thought. I think everything is planned out on our show except the jokes and the interruptions of you just said that. Let me throw this thing making fun of you about what you just said in there, and it's all done in good fun. Like all these guys are my best of friends, and we would never try to intentionally upset each other.
Yeah.
I do have to say, let me jump back real quick, because 40K Radio was an inspiration. But more so than 40K Radio was World's End Radio at the time, which was a show out of Australia, and originally just kind of focused on Games Workshop games. I think they explored other things from them, but that show we loved. Like we were absolutely huge fans of that show, and it definitely inspired kind of our attitude towards the hobby and that kind of thing. And then D6 Generation. I mean, I loved listening to them talk about, hey, I'm building this set for this Wild West game that we're playing, and this is how I built it, and I use this balsa wood and this, that, and next week, oh yeah, I got a little further on that set, and here's the problems I ran into. And so that really, I was like, no matter what we do, we have to have like a hobby progress section. It's not really about just, I painted this, I painted that. It's the problems I ran into and the techniques I used and the thoughts I had as I approached it. And that, believe it or not, like, and sometimes that section's pretty dry when I don't do any painting, or fortunately we have Justin on the show who paints all the time, but that is a segment that people consider, honestly, like that's the thing that draws them to the show. And I think it's because it's from week to week they're hearing our failures as well as our successes, because some of the best the best painting videos will show you where they made mistakes and how they fix those mistakes as well.
Yeah.
Rather than just, I painted this and look how great it is. I want to know where you screwed up, because I'm going to screw up. And then how did you fix that? And I've learned more from that than from any just look at my golden demon painted, thing.
You know what? And I think that's the X factor right there, because your relatability to the mass wargamer audience is huge.
And I think it's also we put ourselves out there, right? Like we're not hey, this is and I'm not making fun of you here, but hey, this is Mini Wargaming Dave, or hey, this is the guys from Life After Cousins say Big Nasty B, and like we don't have handles or anything. I'm Carl, and this is Jeff, and that's Justin, and we're gonna talk to you about fun stuff. Like that's our objective. And then I know I'm going on. If you want me to stop, I'll stop at any moment.
No.
And the other X factor, if you will, maybe the Y factor at that point, is we don't follow the trend, right? 9th edition's just about to come out. Yeah. I'm very excited about it. I played my first game of it last week. The upcoming podcasts, videos, YouTube streamers, whatever, are all talking 9th edition. Great. We're going to talk about our favorite heroes of the Imperium in Warhammer 40K this week. And next week we're going to talk about our favorite Xenos heroes of 40K.
Yeah.
Why am I not talking 9th edition? Because everybody else is. If you want to hear about it, there's a lot of people out there providing that content. I'll give you my perspective on it in brief during the show. Yeah. Things we like, things we don't like, but I don't feel like I want to dedicate an entire show to that. And this really became apparent. There was on Bella Lost Souls, there used to be an article that would review podcasts each week.
Yeah.
And I think the guy that wrote it, he went by Evil Ed. There's another moniker for you. And you'd see your show come up there, and he'd recommend, oh yeah, you should listen to this if you like such and such or whatever. The Necrons had come out for 5th edition, and I looked at that article, and there were maybe 6 or 8 podcasts that they were mentioned, including ours. And I did a Control F and looked at the word Necron, and it showed up like 43 times in that article because the Necrons had just released. Meanwhile, our show was like, here's great ideas for setting up your painting studio. I don't know what it was. I don't remember what the exact topic was, but it had nothing to do with Necrons, because everybody else is looking at Necrons. How many times can you hear the same people talk about the same rules? Like, let's give you something else to listen to.
Interesting.
And I think that helped develop us as, the Necrons are out. They look awesome. I'm very excited. Aaron plays Necrons. Can't wait to play against them. So anyway, about this painting studio, and it gave a different topic. I mean, you can only eat vanilla ice cream for so long before you're like, man, I could really go for some chocolate or mint chocolate chip or something, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so we always will go against the grain like that. And just, I mean, there's parts of ninth edition we may talk about, but you know, we'll get there.
If they fall under your radar of interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's interesting. You know, I think because of that, you have, I don't know if it was on purpose it sounds like it is on purpose, but
very much on purpose.
Like
yeah.
Inadvertently, maybe intentionally, maybe non-intentionally is what I'm trying to say. You've non-intentionally created evergreen content that is always relevant.
Yeah, and that was another thing. Like, we try not to be dated. I mean, there are things out there that we have that are a bit dated, but in general, we try to do things that are not dated. You know, that you could listen to now. Our hobby progress section is going to be dated, but you could listen to the topic of that episode. Some of our favorites are like how to cheat on your spouse with 40K, right? like which was a fictional, silly idea that stemmed from Dragon Magazine back in the day. Used to do this. There was a comic strip called What's New, and they would always talk about how they were going to talk about sex in D&D this episode, and then something would happen, and then they'd be like, well, I guess we're going to talk about it next week. And so we had always talked about how to cheat on your spouse with 40K. We're going to get to, oh wait, something's come up. We'll get to it next week. And we just kept pushing it off, and it was just an inside joke. And then finally we're like, let's do this episode. And we did like this episode that was just really silly about and it goes from pretty mundane to like, you know, oh, buy stuff and you buy 2 boxes, but you combine the sprues into 1 box, you know, and then bring it home. Your wife doesn't know, right? To you're renting an apartment and potentially cutting your spouse's brake lines if they find out things. And, you know, and people got genuinely upset about this episode. I'm like, you realize we're joking about all. But it's still to this day one of my favorites. And so we would just do, you know, whatever, as you said, whatever kind of came into our radar that we thought was fun to talk about that time.
So, Carl, what's your day job, if you don't mind? I don't know if you're public about that, but
no problem. I am. So I just recently was promoted. Actually, I am vice president of operations and IT for an internet security company. So we provide you know, email and threat intelligence and that kind of thing to keep companies and people safe when they're working on the internet. Okay. Primarily, this is all corporate driven.
So is this? I mean, you said this is recent.
The promotion to VP. I was senior director before. Yeah.
So, what does your career look like?
Yeah, that's, you know, it's weird. I'm ex-military. I was in the Army. I'm now 50 years old. So I was in the Army from 88 to 92, right after high school. I ended up working for a retail chain called Mervin's after I got out of the military, working shoplift apprehension and employee, you know, it's called loss prevention, catching employees that are stealing, catching shoplifters, that kind of thing. Yeah. I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and I was like, I can't work in retail anymore. This is awful. And a friend of mine had worked for a small internet service provider and said, oh, you should come over here and work tech support. And I was like, I don't know anything about this stuff. Oh, we'll teach you and come on over. So I came over and I interviewed, and they hired me into that. And then eventually, because I had management training from my retail job, they made me a manager of the support department. That company got acquired by another company. I was managed an even larger group at that point, and then became a project manager for a while. And then that company had a bunch of layoffs, and I got laid off. I worked for Microsoft in their NOC for a while, and then eventually worked for this small little company called Dialpad that had gone bust kind of during the internet, the bubble bursting. And they were just they were like Skype. It was like a Skype company. Okay. And eventually we got bought by Yahoo. And I worked for Yahoo for 9 years. 9.5 years until I left and went to this company that I work at now.
What'd you do at Yahoo?
A lot of things. Over 9 years. I mean, it was tremendously rewarding. I left at a good time. I've been at this company now for almost 7 years. At Yahoo, I came in as a support manager. for the product that we were purchased, right? We had been purchased, and I was still managing the team supporting that product. And eventually I was going to lose that job because all their support stuff was up in Washington. And so I had been helping some folks, and I got an offer to work in another department, managing project managers, or excuse me, becoming a project manager. Eventually that led to managing the project managers, and eventually working in the product side, where I was working with Yahoo Mail, Yahoo Messenger, Yahoo Groups, and Photos. And then eventually I found my way into the operations team for yahoo.com and news.yahoo.com and all that stuff, sports.yahoo.com.
So, okay, so would you say it's fair to say that your background with the internet, we'll call it, that you would have a very good idea of how to start a channel, start a podcast, and know much better than just the average person and what things to do.
I think I probably had a leg up a little bit. I kind of enjoy, one of the things I enjoy about the podcast is seeing what things work and what things don't work. Right. So like, it's fun to say, well, let's try this topic. We did a topic I thought this is going to be a great episode. It was, so you want to become a Black Library author. And we talked to many of the Black Library authors during it, new and old. We talked to the editor about what are they looking for and how do people submit stuff, and how do things grow like this. And and I thought this is going to be a great episode. Nope. Apparently not a lot of people want to be Black Library authors. Like, I just kind of assumed, well, it would be cool to be a writer. I think people would like that. Turns out not really. There's a very small subset of people that are very interested in doing that.
Right.
I thought for sure that would have been a hugely successful episode. So, but it was interesting to see, okay, well, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Let's think about this. And as far as the marketing, the channel and that kind of thing, clearly I had like insight into how does marketing on the internet work for a large corporation. They have tons of money to throw at it. We don't, but it was just fun to experiment and see what did and didn't work. Clearly something worked. And a lot of it is, I think, what I attribute to my success at work is I'm approachable, I'm friendly, I'm willing to help. And I think that has translated through the mic on the show, that we're approachable, we're friendly, we want to be supportive. We're not here. If the rest of the internet is this storm of anger and rage, and nobody hates Warhammer 40K like Warhammer 40K fans, we provide kind of a safe harbor where, look, we do moderate our Facebook group fairly heavily, but I think if you listen to the show, you understand the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think that's needed. A lot more of that is needed. Not just like,
I have seen more of it too.
Yeah,
I have seen more of it, and I do feel, I'll pat myself on the back a little bit. I do feel like we kind of led that charge. We've been championing this for a long, long time. You guys are, one of the things I love about your guys' videos and stuff is you guys are incredibly like positive. You're into obviously the narrative aspects of things. The first time I came across you was what's the title of it, with the sergeant, the Black Legion sergeant with the
40K rejects.
Like, oh my God, that made it around our group. This is before you and I ever met. Like, that made it around our group so many times that we were just like, this is the best thing ever. Did you see what happened next? And we just thought that was absolutely hysterical. I love that kind of stuff. You've seen I'm sure you've seen the animated short,
Stardies.
Not that one, which is incredible.
Yeah.
But this was like a silly, like cartoony one where it was voiced over, and it was talking about how Space Marines and they deep strike and they do all that. Have you not seen that video? It's very, if I showed it to you, you'll know what I'm talking about.
All right.
And then I run into the guy on a forum who actually created that, and we've become friends since. And that's Campbell McLaughlin. He and his partner do the 40K Badcast, which I think is just hysterical. Like those guys are awesome too. So, and they're very much about being positive in the hobby and that kind of thing too. So I love seeing that kind of stuff grow.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that all that support type of stuff that kind of comes from the hobby itself is just,
yeah. And like we said at
fantastic.
the beginning, the energy you put out there is kind of what you get back. If you're putting out a bunch of rage and anger, well, that's what's going to be on your page, a bunch of rage and anger.
I agree.
Look at the silver lining to these things. That's what's going to come back at you.
You know, it's funny you should say that, because with the videos and making battle reports for the amount of years that I've been doing it, and having guests come in and play, I have found that the type of guests that prefer to play against me, they're non-competitive.
Yep.
They care more about having fun than they care about winning, and they are very fluent in the language of banter.
Sure.
Sure. And so that's kind of what I project, right? So
yeah, exactly. So you're going to draw those kind of people to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why when I come out there, you and I are going to have a good time, because all of those things line up, which is why I watch your stuff, right? Because you line up with what I'm finding interesting. If I were highly competitive, and there's a Reddit subreddit for like competitive 40K. And, I'm occasionally searching through Reddit, through forums, through searches to see where's my show mentioned, what are people saying, are there ideas or thoughts there that we can incorporate into the show. And I see the subreddit and they're like, oh, and they're talking specifically about me, and this guy doesn't even know, I don't remember the particular rule that the community had focused itself around, but at that point, but it's like, oh, he doesn't even know what this is. He doesn't know how to play this game. And I'm like, sure. Okay, guy. Sure. I'm clearly in the wrong forum, right? As long as you guys are having fun with what you're doing, knock yourself out. But, I'm having fun. So am I doing it wrong? I don't think so.
No, no, I don't think, is there a wrong way to enjoy the hobby?
No, of course not. Yeah. As long as you're, there is a thing from Games Workshop where it's, I'm trying to remember, John had told me about it. It was like, it's your hobby. It's my hobby. It's our hobby, right? It's whatever you want it to be, so make it your own.
It's actually another layer to that. Your hobby, our hobby, in addition to the hobby itself, is actually a similar hobby, because my hobby, other than just playing the game, is documenting the game and presenting the game and storytelling the game, right?
Yeah.
And your hobby, in addition to playing the game, is talking about the game and presenting the stories of the game. Like, you have a different hobby on top of the hobby.
Yeah.
That a lot of people don't have. Yeah.
I'd say yours is even more involved, because this is a revenue generating thing for you. Like, this is your business as well as your hobby. You're one of the lucky few that gets to do both.
I recognize. I do recognize that we're certainly fortunate in where we're at. Every day I recognize that, man. Like, it's awesome.
Enjoy every day, because, man, that's awesome. I wish I loved my work as much as that. My work pays well, and I like it, and I work with people I really respect and enjoy, but I'd much rather be playing 40K.
It's so interesting. And I actually, it dawned on me the other day when I did a practice game of 9th edition, and it dawned on me, I'm like, man, I haven't played a game of 40K and not filmed it in years. It's been years.
Do you feel that adds pressure to you in any way, or you kind of evolved beyond that at this point? Like, when you were first putting videos out, and I watched you also did a video on how you guys do your battle report videos, like how you edit them together, and you just, I'm rolling the dice now, and I'm not, you have it down to, at the risk of sounding, like I'm sucking up to you. Like, you watch a Tarantino movie and you're like, yes, this is a Tarantino movie. I can see how it is filmed and the pacing and everything. And others try to emulate that. You have a very distinctive style for your battle reports that you watch and you go, there's the background music. There's the cuts to the rolling of dice. There's the cuts to, now I've moved this here and this, you're cutting out all the all the chaff that doesn't need to be there, so that you can get the story through and see what happened. And you focus in particular on the dramatic die rolls, which is the nice thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, do you find that when you first started doing that, you were more nervous about putting that content out and how it would be received?
Absolutely, 100%. Back in like 13 years ago when we started, I used to edit all the videos back then, and I trimmed every single clip.
Yeah.
And every time I would mess up a word, I would edit it out. And and I'd go through it, and like there'd be mistakes in the game, because I'm not a perfect player by any means. And so
I have often said I've never played a game of 40K without a mistake happening in it.
Yeah.
It's
it's way too much stuff. It's ridiculous. And I'd catch it afterwards and like, oh man, that's like a blatant mistake.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would either cut it out, sometimes I'd leave it, hope no one would see it, and sometimes I would leave it and actually add captions like, this is a mistake, guys. And so that was back then, right? And
yeah.
And so back then when you're presenting yourself online, you're like, okay, you want to, like a lot of people are seeing this, and you don't want people to see mistakes, and you want to be viewed as the professional. But what does that even mean?
What does that mean? Right.
Yeah, like I'm a professional, therefore I don't make mistakes and I'm very good at the game, or I'm a video personality that just documents myself playing the game, and what you see is what you get. And that's eventually what I grew into, right? Because I mean, now we certainly don't profess to be
you're a professional video content deliverer, maybe not a professional 40K player, right?
Correct. That is very, very accurate, because I've spoken with tournament players who are professional 40K players. Yeah. That is all they do. They play in tournaments and win tournaments,
right?
And know the rules for every single codex and collect every army. That is very different from what I do. And if they make a mistake, it's not forgetting a basic rule of the game. Like, their mistake is, oh, I didn't see that five steps down the road because something distracted me. Like, that's their mistake. It's a different
strategic or tactical error, not a mistake of the Oh, I missed, something,
or it's like all right, I'm calculating the odds of the chances of this going off versus this. Oh, I rolled a 2 on my charge and it was 3 inches away. Oh darn. Okay, so that's their mistake. And so it was interesting actually talking to a couple of 40K tournament players on the podcast and interviewing them and getting their perspective, because it made me appreciate both sides better. It made me appreciate the tournament players who are really focused on that, and it made me appreciate what I do better, because it made me realize that what I'm doing isn't that.
Right.
It's something else entirely, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I shouldn't focus on that at all. I should focus on what I'm enjoying.
Right.
And projecting that, because that's really what I'm good at. I'm good at enjoying what I'm doing. Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more. And in fact, I went through the exact same thing. Like, when we were first doing the show, I would edit every show. Oh, there was this gap between this pause in my statement, because I was thinking about what I was going to say next. I removed that gap. Now I sound like I just flowed, and I would go through and remove all these. I'd spend the show was 3 hours. I would spend 7 hours editing out gaps and ums and ahs. I just got better at not saying and ah as much. Mm-hmm. And now my editing of a show is really just putting each of the segments together, and maybe removing something that was said that was completely, or we stopped for a minute, or something along those lines that was said that oh wait, let me rethink how I want to say that, and then, but that's so infrequent at this point.
Yeah,
so infrequent. But yeah, now we're just kind of we're so practiced at it that we can just go through the show.
Yeah,
but that and there's room. I think there's room in this hobby. I mean, clearly there is, for all types of takes on it. There's a lot of people playing this game more than ever, I think. I think more than ever. I think you look at GW stock price and you can see that more and more people have to be getting into this game. I personally know people who've come back to the game who had left it long ago as of 8th edition.
8th edition, yeah.
And I think 9th will draw even more. I mean, look at how fast the Indomitus box sold out. And you could say, oh, they didn't anticipate enough, but I think maybe they over marketed it and didn't realize just how popular it was going to be. What do you think about their response to Games Workshop's response to that, to it selling out and then saying, okay, now we'll make it made to order. You can each order one. You have a week, 2 weeks to order it.
I think it was smart. It's the best they could do for the scalpers. I mean, because it was bound to happen.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, that's a smart move.
Yeah.
What would I do if I was the CEO in that situation? And that was one of the options that was before me. I think I would choose that. I mean,
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and somebody said, well, why didn't they just do that from the beginning? I'm like, well, then you cut out all the friendly local game stores, right? You want to make sure they're supported too. I think it was a great response.
Yeah.
We had people on our forum who were very upset when they couldn't get the box, and rightfully so. I mean, understandably so. When they were like, how did they not anticipate 10 minutes later 15 minutes later it's sold out? I feel really disappointed. And I remember saying at one point in this thread, I was like, if you guys don't think Games Workshop is trying to figure out how to make this right, rethink it, because they will. And then it was like the next day, they're like, if you didn't get one, we didn't anticipate this, you can order one. And I was like, there you go. Yeah. It really is a new company.
You got to wonder if they actually had planned for it in the event of.
Yeah, I wonder. They could have said, look, when we deploy software to servers, right? We say, we're going to deploy this to these servers. Everything looks like it should go fine. We've tested it. Everything should be fine. What's our backup plan? If it goes wrong, what do we do? We always have a plan like that. And if you're doing a major launch like this, I'll bet you they treat it kind of the same way. I hadn't really thought about it until you said that, but I'll bet you they treat it like, okay, what happens if it all sells out? I know for a fact back in the day when the Horus Heresy books came out and they released, it was one of the slipcase collections they released. And I know for a fact they thought there is no way this thing is going to sell out. And we're going to be stuck with a bunch of these. It's a limited edition. We're going to be stuck with a bunch of them. And then what are you going to do? And I knew the guy who actually did all the layout, was in charge of the team, did layout and kind of pushing this forward. Alan Bly would write the stuff along with several other folks. And then this was the guy who was responsible for the look of the book, the interior and exterior structure of the book, the whole thing. And I remember him saying they said this would not sell out. And they were concerned that we had invested too much money in it. And then he had to call them, or he got a call from them, and they said, you have to stop. We have to pull it down because it's selling out too fast. So, I mean, it's very difficult for them, I think, to judge this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think they've probably also learned over the years, okay, so what's our backup plan if this happens? What if we wind up with them not selling out? What do we do then?
Yeah.
Right. There's probably a number of, then it's probably, well, wait till it sells, just keep it on the shelves and wait till it sells or whatnot. But I bet you're right. I'll bet you're right. I bet they had this in the back pocket. Hey, look, if it sells out, we've already limited it to, you can only get 3 or whatever. But if that all sells out, we've talked to our manufacturer that will take these orders and then we'll do a one-off.
Because ultimately, I mean, they're a miniature company. They want to make money. They got to be creating the methods of making the most money, right? And this
the stockholders demand it, right?
Yeah.
The reality is they're a publicly traded company.
This makes them more money.
Yeah.
I think in the best way, because everyone's happy, or everyone's the happiest in this case, right? Everyone gets what they want.
If you wanted to buy 5 of them, well, okay, maybe, rethink it,
Yeah.
But yeah. I thought it was a great solution. I thought it was an elegant solution. I was really, really I was excited to see them pull that off. I almost went and ordered another one just because I was like, I really don't need another one of these things. So, but yeah,
That's curious too, because I know people that ordered it and don't collect Space Marines nor Necrons. You know, they they just wanted it because it was new. Sure, it had the rule book in it, but you know, that'll be available later or now.
I know some people who've decided to pick up Necrons because of these new Necrons coming out, right? And the models, God, the models are so good. The Space Marine models in that, the Primaris Marines are incredible.
Oh yeah, they've never made better models.
I agree.
Yeah, like they're getting better every year with the stuff that they're making. It's incredible.
Yeah. And the bikes are just that honestly. So I don't know about you. GW sent us a review copy of the book. I'm sure you guys are in that category. So we got it, and I had our Necron player. I said, "Here's all the Necrons. Go assemble them so you can talk about them." I'm going to assemble the Space Marines, and then I was like, "Oh, these bikes are just incredible. I need 3 more bikes. I guess I'll buy another Indomitus. I guess I'll buy one, so I can get more bikes.
Yeah.
I don't need all the character models. I'll probably end up either kit bashing those or giving them to friends or selling them. But and then the Necrons, we have multiple Necron players. So, but I've seriously considered maybe I should start a Necron army. I mean, these are pretty cool. I'm like, I really don't need another army. So I love it. I love what they're doing. I love everything that Games Workshop is doing at this point. And I think when people kind of rail against GW, as 40K players are known to do, oh, it's the same old GW. It really isn't. The company has drastically changed.
It's very different.
3 to 4 years. Yeah,
absolutely. They're more welcoming of their fan base.
For sure.
They're including, like, they hear them. I would say that the biggest difference is they acknowledge what the fans want.
Yep.
And they are openly communicating with their fans.
This is how I summarize it. The old CEO was, don't tell us what you want, we'll tell you what you want. The new CEO is, tell us what you want, let's see how we can fit all this together. Why wouldn't you? Like, this is the 2000s, right? Like, it's time to start acting like a 2000 company, and I think he's killing it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So something I'll mention about the models that I noticed, and I noticed this recently, but most particularly with the new Fabius Bile model.
Yeah.
Because I have the old and the new Fabius Bile, and the new one's awesome. Like, you look at it and the detail and his pose and like his bits, and awesome looking. The aesthetic is amazing. The scale is awesome. Everything looks really good. And the difference, I think, one of the biggest differences between the old models and the new models, other than the fact that the new ones just look so much better, is that the new ones feel like if you knock them over, they'll break. Because there's so many parts.
On some of them, for sure.
On some of them, yeah. Not all, but on some of them, it's like you knock it over, it'll break. Whereas the old ones,
spindly pieces, and some of them
spindly pieces, yeah. The old ones, like, you knock it over and it doesn't break.
Yeah. What about though? But if you go back far enough, remember the metal ones?
Yeah.
How many times you have a sword bend, and then you're like, I'm trying to bend it back so it doesn't break, and you hear it crick, and you're like, oh no. And when that sword broke, it was like, how am I ever going to put this sword? Like, no amount of glue is going to hold this sword together again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there are some very, very tiny pieces on these things because they can do that level of detail now.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park. Just because you could, does that mean you should? And one of my favorites is the Necromunda Goliath gang. There's a guy that has a cigar in his mouth.
Okay.
And it's a separate piece. The cigar is a separate piece that goes into his mouth. And people were losing it all the time. And then one of the model builders at Games Workshop showed you, this is how you put it together. And he had the head, and he left the cigar on the sprue, and he put a dollop of glue on the cigar on the sprue and put the head on the cigar. And then he clipped off the cigar off the sprue.
Awesome.
And he goes, now you won't lose the cigar. And I'm like, of course, that's how you do it. Yeah, how tiny is that thing, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I would. I mean, I wouldn't want it to be the old way.
No.
The new way is amazing. You know.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
And then you could put it in your tableware case, and it's all secure.
That's right.
You just can't put it on a plane.
I love it. It just all comes back around full circle. So okay, so you said you played a little bit of ninth. So that I want to talk to you about that a little bit,
Sure.
because I've played a bit of, like, let's see, 4 or 5 games.
I've played one full game of ninth at this point.
Okay.
And it took us a while because we wanted to go through, every rule, make sure we were doing it right. And I still think we made mistakes.
Oh, like, yeah. I mean, it's the old and new editions melding, right?
Right.
So, first off, what army did you use when you played?
Thousand Sons. Played against Orcs.
Against Horus, okay.
We played a 1,000-point game. We wanted to keep it kind of low. We went new points because we have the document for the new points that GW sent to previewers. So we went with new points. We played that. To be honest, I'm a power level fan, and I know a lot of people aren't, but I love power level, and I can't wait till they update the power level stuff because that's what we typically want to play.
Yeah.
And we also want to play Crusade, like big time. Crusade is the way we want to play this game. I'm so excited about that feature. But we did play 1,000 points. I played against my podcast partner and buddy Jody. He brought his Orcs. Man, I am so glad tanks can fire in close combat now.
Right.
Even if it's at a -1, it's viable. It works. I think that I ended up losing the game. But man, like, again, so much fun was had. Like, it wasn't like I just there were so many Orcs, I just couldn't get them off the objectives fast enough, right? And it was one of those cumulative objective games where it's like every round you're on it, you're gaining points. But boy, there was a point where I had a las cannon predator that was just decimating like his heavy, mechs and stuff. And finally he breaks free with some orc bikers, and they come charging at the predator. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to spin this command point for Overwatch, because now you have to spin the command point on Overwatch.
That's right.
And I roll a 4 dice, and I roll 3 6s and a 5, and I just vaporize all these orcs that were going to tear my poor predator, with that claw. They were going to tear my poor predator to pieces. I just vaporize them. I was like, I don't care if I win or lose at this point. That was the game right there as far as I'm concerned. But the game was bloody. I mean, by the time we were done, I think he maybe had 7 or 8 models on the table, and I had 3.
Oh, wow. So that's a good game.
Yeah, it was. And to me, that's what makes a good game. Like, I don't, even if I get, my loss handed to me handily, like, I think the end game there was something like 28-10, in points or something like that in that game.
Right.
It was clear I was losing, and I was still trying to overcome that. But there was a point where it's like point of no return. There's no way I can get enough points to win. But even there, I didn't care, because like I felt like I was doing something. I wasn't just getting wiped off the table. I was actually doing things. And man, I love this game. And I hadn't played in a while because of the coronavirus stuff. And so it was really fun for us to get together and play. And I think Jody felt the same way. Like, we'd been waiting for ninth for so long, and finally to be able to sit down and play a game, it kind of reignited why we do all this for us. So it was awesome.
So I'm going to describe something to you, and then I'll ask you after I describe it what you like to do.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things, if not my most favorite thing to do in a game of 40K is, because I love Khorne, I love Berserkers, is when I charge with Berserkers and I kill a unit with Berserkers. There's just like that feeling of all of those attacks and that overwhelming blood and carnage is just awesome. I don't care if I lose the game. If that happens at some point, I don't care if the Berserkers die right after. Right? I'm satisfied, right? Like,
listen, the blood flowed and Khorne was happy.
That's right.
That mattered.
What is that for you? Like, do you have something like that where You know, like you don't care if you win or lose after something cool like that happens.
I don't know if there's one particular thing with the Thousand Sons army that I play, because the thing I love about that army is you have to have the things in the right place at the right time in order to get things to sync up correctly and pull off a particular move. I love I love when my Scarab Occult Terminators actually earn some points back, because I always feel like they don't really live up to what I need them to. For me, I think the satisfying thing for me, this is it. The satisfying thing for me with those Thousand Sons is that they are incredibly durable, and people don't realize that. Like, they think the Rubric Marines in particular, they think that Plague Marines are like they're tough and they have, what we used to call feel no pain and yada yada, and that's how they're represented. But there's different ways the game represents toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And the psychic might of the Thousand Sons and their all is dust ability, which means basically if the weapon causes only one wound against a Rubric Marine, I get a save at basically a +1. So a 3+ Rubric Marine, you fire a bolter at him, a regular bolter, no AP minus or anything. He's saving on a 2-up.
Yeah.
And that tends to surprise people. And so what I love more than anything is, Larry, you have like a squad of Rubric Marines standing on something and they just take all kinds of fire and they're still just kind of standing there. And I'm like, yep, you're going to have to come a little closer if you want to deal with that. And then you're going to have to deal with all this psychic powers. That's the thing that really appeals to me about that army. I just love the concept of sorcery and in this future setting, mm-hmm. and the fact that it's like this corruption that they're manipulating. Like that to me makes them the most interesting army to me. And so I think for me, it's being able to withstand just a ton of punishment, and then people going, what? And then the other thing I'll do, I always like call my rolls like, like I think it was the same. It was my buddy Josh was gonna charge my Dreadnought with something, and my Dreadnought has a missile launcher and a las cannon. This was last edition. I said, well, what's going to happen is you're going to charge him. Sure. I go ahead. I'm going to fire Overwatch and I'm going to take his head off with my las cannon. And then sure enough, it's just like, oh, there's my 6 for Overwatch and take your damage. And I'm like,
see, there
you told me, man. I go, I always, or like I'll throw the dice when I know it's like a bad situation. I'm like, I just need to roll 8 straight 5s or 6s, no problem. And I just throw the dice and don't even look at them. I go, so what are you going to do next? A bunch of 1s and 2s. Yeah. but
that's
yeah,
fun.
I really resonate with that army in particular. And I'm not the best player of it, but I really do enjoy it.
Yeah. I like calling dice too. It's fun. That actually happened in my game yesterday. Luca, I was fighting Luca. It was, let's see, World Eaters versus Ultramarines. And he was firing at one of my demon engines. I think my Mauler Fiend. And, they got a 5-up demon save, right? So I was like, okay, 2 Mark of Dave's coming up. That's the 6 on my die. Yeah. Right. And I just roll it, and like 2 6s come up, and he's like, oh, come on.
And you're just like, yep.
Yeah. That's it, right?
That's what happens. I told you.
It's so satisfying. Like, that's just another layer of satisfaction to the game. Oh, I love moments like that.
I used to run a World Eaters army. Like, I had all the Forge World Eater pieces on them and everything. So it was like this total Forge World army. And I used to run, and it wasn't the best thing, but I used to run a Khorne Lord with a demon weapon. This was 6th and 7th edition. Mm-hmm. And so I think he had like base 4 attacks or whatever, +1 on the charge. Okay, but then you roll 2d6, and if any of those is a 1, he takes a wound and he doesn't get any attacks.
Yeah.
But the times I would roll double 6s, oh yeah, my Khorne Lord waves in with 17 attacks on the charge. It just be like, this is the best thing ever. It was worth every failure just to have that moment.
Yeah, it's like Karn too. I don't know if how much you.
Oh, I used to use him all the time, especially when he would just rip apart vehicles. Oh,
Oh yeah,
you guys are in a Land Raider, huh? No problem.
yeah. He's a beast, man. Oh,
Yeah.
he's so much fun to use. And
When he would attack back in those days when he was considered a monstrous creature for his attacks, and so he would just rip open vehicles with that axe, and you're just like, oh my god. Yeah, I love that. Love that stuff.
I think he and Abaddon are actually my favorite characters to field, not just for like their fun stuff they do in the game, but like because
Yeah.
I feel like I know them better
Yeah.
than other characters, right? So it's like, okay, yeah, Abaddon would want this to happen, therefore this is what I'm going to do in the game. Do you ever do that? Do you ever play narratively?
Oh, for sure with that. And here's the thing: when I first got into Chaos, it was a Death Guard army, and I read an article in a White Dwarf, and they had detailed out this beautiful cityscape, and it was Death Guard, and I'd never seen them before, and they had like zombies with them and typhus and all this stuff, and in D&D I was huge into undead and that kind of stuff, and I told my buddy, I go, this is going to be my next army. Like, these guys look awesome. And he's like, you realize they're really tough. Like, they're tough as nails, right? And I'm like, no, I had no idea. I just think they're really cool. So I had built this army all around that. But in that narrative report, I remember there was this one picture of Typhus with like a targeting reticle over him as like a sniper was shooting at him or something. And he had lost all his wounds. And I remember in the article, they're like, well, Typhus teleports back up to his battle barge, right? Like, he didn't get killed. He teleported back up to the battle barge, right? Seeing no battles. So now literally every time, like, oh, Armin's going to die, he teleported back up to the battle barge. Oh no, he stepped into the webway, you know? I'm like,
That's right, because he can't die. I mean,
it would crush me.
Do you ever have a moment in a game where it's like something like that, where someone's about to die, and you're faced with okay, well, I could hold him back and kind of put him behind cover so that he
doesn't
die, or I run him forward. What would you do in that case?
What's he supposed to do, right? I mean, to me, it's like Karn's not going to go hide behind it. He's got one wound left. Yeah. He's not going to hide behind there and lick his wounds.
No,
that's just going to anger him more, and he's going to charge forward.
That's right. Every time.
Yeah. Every time. He got shot. Well, he was wounded. You didn't realize he was wounded on the battlefield. He recovered later.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
I like your suit of corn armor there.
Oh yeah,
that is pretty impressive.
That's fun to put on.
Oh, you wear it?
I've worn it once. Yes.
You not? The cod piece is probably your favorite part.
that is my favorite part. No, yeah, it's just a fun piece. It's super cool.
That's incredible. I just realized that the skull is the mask. Like, it's part of the costume. Like, I thought it was on like a skeleton thing. No, the head skull. It's actually the mask.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that is really cool. Oh, that is pretty cool. Where'd you get that made?
That's Art Hammer.
Okay. Is that a website?
Yeah.
Is a guy?
Yeah, it's a web. I hope I'm not saying the wrong name. Be very embarrassed, but I believe it's Art Hammer. Yeah, they make a number of different suits of armor that are heavily inspired.
LARPA Workshop. That's them. Yeah.
So you're looking it up right now?
Look, yeah, I see the Chaos Corn armor set right here.
Yeah. So I got that. I got another Dwarven set, and I have a Sisters of Battle.
These guys are really talented.
Yeah, I saw one time. I'm like, man, I want one of those.
That is cool.
Yeah, they're a pretty penny, but once you have one, it's like, man. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it's really the same cost as like a Warlord Titan.
Yeah.
So it's like, actually, no, I think the Warlord might be more, but yeah, it's kind of all within the realm of this hobby, right? It's like
you'll use it just as often.
That's right. I've used my Warlord Titan once, but the one time I did use him, it was incredible, and I do plan on using him again. So
I have a Chaos Reaver Titan painted by Caleb Wissenbeck. That he just kept hassling me about, let me paint it, and I'm like, fine. So he painted it. It is incredible. I mean, every time people look at it and they're like, oh, I didn't see that. There's so much freehand on it. It's just insane. And we were at Warhammer World I was there with my wife. We'd flown out there and we were visiting friends and stuff, and we were looking at the Forge World shop, and she was like, "Well, you have." I was looking at the Warlord Titan, and I'm like, "Oh man, look at this! Is really cool." And yada yada. And she's like, "Well, you already have the Warhound and the Reaver." She goes, "You should get that one." And I'm like, "Yeah, I should." I go, because I haven't used the Reaver in a game yet, so I held off on buying it. I'm kind of glad I did, because I just, I haven't even I've used the Reaver once, and it's like I need to get more use out of these things if I'm going to spend that kind of money at this point. Yeah, that's kind of where my mind is at. It's like I see a lot of models come out, and I'm like, yeah, I could get those. Am I really going to use that in the near future? Probably not. I have a closet full of boxes I need to paint and assemble first. Maybe I should do that first, Carl. But that doesn't preclude me from, like, if they came out with a new Thousand Suns unit, I'd be like, well, that clearly I need to pick up, right? Like, that doesn't. That's going to get used immediately, so that immediately goes to the front of the queue.
Exactly. So. All right. Okay. So viewers, we're going to open up the interview to some of your comments and questions. So leave comments for Carl, for us, for whoever, and I'll relay some of those back to you, Carl.
It's still weird to me that people would care what I would think about. Most of the questions I get, I occasionally get questions from people that are wanting to set up a podcast, and how do they set it up, to the point where I literally just wrote an article, and now I just point them to the article. I'm just going to go read this, please. I need to update that because I've updated my hardware. So okay. Go ahead. Did you have something?
I was just going to say, where do people go to find you, to find your podcast?
Yeah, sure. So obviously any podcast aggregator you can go to, whether it's iTunes or whatever. But also you can go to the independentcharacters.com. That's independent, all E's, independent. But if you accidentally put an A there at the end, one of our listeners bought that domain and redirects it to ours. But the independentcharacters.com is where you can find us. We also have a Facebook page. We have a Facebook group. The group is very in a line with the show. A lot of times people will try to join the group, and we have questions they answer, and we'll tell them, please go read what the show is about, so that you're at least make sure this is the right place for you, right? Everybody's welcome, but some people may not find it. They may find it heavily moderated, or that kind of thing. So what have you been doing during the COVID lock in place? So you're fortunate in the sense that you can still play games with your close-knit family and group there, right?
Yeah. So, we've continued to make videos. I've continued to make videos from home, and a positive byproduct of COVID, if you can count them, this is something that has come that would not have come otherwise, is my wife actually started playing 40K.
Oh boy! Oh yeah, I saw that. I saw that video.
And I mean, that's incredible, right? Like, we did a campaign together. We did. That's awesome. And it was a slow grow. She played Blood Angels. I played Black Legion, and it was fun. And we did Awesome. We involved the community, so they would vote on what she should add next to her force, right?
Yeah.
And so. Super fun, man. And we're gonna do Crusade, and she'll be playing Sisters, and I'll do World Eaters.
Nice.
And she's excited for it. She's excited for Crusade, and that's kind of really it, because I've continued to work the whole time, and just kind of focusing on social media and making posts and creating content as per normal.
My regular work is ramped up, but we've been primarily doing online role-playing games, that kind of thing. Normally tabletop, not like World of Warcraft, that kind of stuff, but tabletop role-playing games, Call of Cthulhu, Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing. We've actually found that we've been able to reconnect with that a bit because we are doing it remotely. It's easy for everybody to kind of jump on at a particular time. So that's worked really well.
I have a question here. This is, let's see. Nighthawk McAwesome says, so Carl, which army do you think is best, and why is it Dark Eldar?
Dark Eldar are pretty darn good, to be honest with you. And there's been multiple times I've considered starting one, especially because I'm friends with Brian Harvey and the guys that run the Splinter Mind podcast. And we were all part of the playtest group during the Dark Eldar Codex. So I know that Codex is quite good. As much as I tried to tame it down, Brian was having none of it. Boy, I have the hardest time against that army. What army is best? It's the Orcs. I mean, because I would love to play them. I always lose to them. I always lose. There's just so many of them.
You know what? I feel the same way. I feel like if I didn't play Chaos, I'd be an Orc player. Totally.
Yeah. And I think they share some of the same traits. Like Chaos, you can kit bash a lot of stuff. Like it's fun to like make things look chaotic for that matter. But with Orcs, like I don't know an Orc player that doesn't kit bash.
Yeah. It's par for the course. It comes with the territory, for sure.
Yeah. And there's been many times we've made jokes because I almost drunkenly bought an Orc army online one time. We were at a tournament and we had left the tournament and we were all at dinner and I'd had a few too many margaritas and we were talking about 40K and I was talking about how the power of eBay, and I go, look, I could buy this army right now, this Orc army, I could just buy it right now. And so this is an ongoing joke about me drunkenly buying an Orc army, which I have not done.
Not yet.
And I keep resisting.
Okay, so this is from Quentin Colley. Thought about Chaos Dreadnought being nerfed in points. Is it still viable? The Hellbrute was nerfed. Huh. Yeah,
I think its points did go up quite a bit. I have had a lot of good luck with my Hellbrute, especially in my Thousand Sons army. One of the things I find is that I tend to add a bunch of las cannons in there. So you heard me earlier talk about a las cannon predator. In my regular like 2,000 point list, I'm fielding 2 of those las cannon predators because when you're firing 4 las cannon shots downrange with rerolls of 1 next to them, or you're casting prescience on them, as well. They tend to punch holes in a lot of big things. And my Dreadnought or Hellbrute is las cannon missile launcher. So I get a lot of use out of that. I think they have gone up in points, but one of the benefits to them now too is they can still move their full distance and fire their weapons with no minus. And that makes them way more viable because now they're way more mobile than they used to be. That guy used to just kind of sit in the back. Now he's just moving around, firing that thing at full BS value. It's pretty nice. For my games, of course, they're still viable. Tournament games, you probably won't see them that often, I don't think. But for mine, I mean, I wouldn't dream of going to war without my Dreadnought, buddy.
I feel the same way about Defi.
Yeah, I'll bet you do.
I'm so happy when I saw the rules. I'm like, what? It's amazing.
But the fact you can move and fire the heavy weapons and still he's hitting on 3s, not too shabby.
And fire when you're locked in combat too, right? Like,
Yep, in your firing phase, yeah.
So much. Like those 2 things right there.
That's why he wins in points.
Yeah. And he's amazing in close combat.
Yep.
He does sick damage, right? Like,
well, if you got a close combat weapon on him, sure. But for mine, he's just walking around, with his las cannons, his missile launcher. But now I can use him right in point blank range. I mean, I know what mine is, but sure. It makes you think twice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's tough for the opponent when you have multiple defilers.
Oh yeah, I would imagine so.
Yeah.
I haven't fielded a defiler in years.
Really?
In years.
Do you have any in your collection?
The new blast stuff? I have one for my Death Guard army. But this may push me over the edge to do one for my Zeech army.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, they're so much better now. Okay, so this is a question. This is a question for me, but I'll direct it at you too. This is from Jesse Y. Which edition has been your favorite in the past, and how do you feel 9th will hold up to it? What was the edition? I mean, I really enjoyed 7th. Like, as much as it got really crazy at the end with so many formations and stuff, I really enjoyed 7th. But I have to say that I'm really liking 9th.
Yep.
Like, I enjoyed 8th when it came out, and 9th is just a better version of 8th. So I think,
of course, better. Yeah.
I think ultimately 9th, like, I'm really enjoying this new edition. And because I've been playing since 4th edition, and what happens when I go from edition to edition is that my mind kind of melds the new rules, and then I eventually forget the old rules.
Right.
And so right now, like, I can't even remember 7th edition rules now because it's been too long.
Yeah.
Right.
When I was playing 7th edition, I used to say the best way to play 7th edition was Horus Heresy. And I felt like it was restrained in the right places. I think 7th edition, especially as you said, towards the end, we weren't playing it towards the end. I was actually playing Age of Sigmar at that point because I was just like, this is entirely too cumbersome at this point. I went back and played a Horus Heresy game a couple years later, and then the minute I got into close combat, I was like, oh, this is dragging so bad. And I know there are people very passionate about Horus Heresy still. I love it. I love the whole theme of it, but I don't play it anymore. For me, 8th has been the best edition, and it's an entire change of the way they approach the game. They went from trying to make a rule for everything to making the game a little more abstract. But now it's a game. It's not a simulation. They realized it's not a simulation of a war. It's a game that gives you the feeling that you're fighting something, right? I mean, that's kind of really what it boils down to. And the game went from, can I do this? No, you can't. Or yes, you can, but you have to do this, to, can I do this? Yes, and you can do this, or you could do this other thing, right? It would take, for example, charging into terrain became, initially it used to be, okay, you charge, but if you charge into terrain, you have to take a -2. They were just like, you know what? You just charge into terrain, like just charge, just go.
Yeah, just go.
They are adding a little bit in 9th, a little bit more of that complexity that they had kind of removed. Maybe they feel they went a little too far, but I'm with you. I've only played one game in 9th so far. It was a great game. I don't feel like I can speak expertly on it so far, but if it's more of 8th, I'm in. And everything I've read, I really, really like. I just haven't put it all to practice yet.
I like what they've done with terrain. I must say.
Yeah, that was a needed change.
Their terrain rules, I think, are the best they've ever been.
The morale rules.
You think the morale is
much better. Because before, and if you don't know, before, like, hey, my leadership is 7. I've lost 10 guys. I roll a d6, for my leadership test, plus that 10. I now have to remove 8 guys off the field. That's just it. Now at least it's, I roll for all those guys to see if any of them just wipe out, right? Yes, is it another roll? It is, but it just doesn't feel so binary.
Yeah. Now it's funny. It actually makes it kind of pulls you into the narrative a little more, because it's like each guy chooses for themselves if they're going to stay or not.
For sure. You get to pick, who gets removed. So,
and I like how the smaller your unit is, the more likely chance that they will still be there.
Right.
And the larger your unit is,
you'll lose it.
You'll lose more.
Yeah.
It kind of makes it less swingy, I find.
Agreed.
On both ends. Yeah. And it's just better overall, I think.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy with that rule.
Yeah.
Really happy with that rule. I did not. I was part of the playtest team. I did not playtest 9th edition. Like, I had left the playtest team prior to that.
Oh yeah.
I was part of the. If you look in the books, you'll see. Thanks to Infinity Circuit and the Mornval. The Mornval is all like the tournament playtesters and that kind of stuff. We were part of like the lore and do the rules match like what you think this would look like. They would ask us like, what are your favorite missions, and can you describe why they were your favorite missions? Does the does the unit represent what it's supposed to in lore? Should we change those things? So as part of that playtest group for a while, I actually started it. And then, real life is just too busy. And I took it very seriously. So like I had done video game playtesting and stuff before, like filing bugs and all this stuff. So I took it very, very seriously. And when I realized like I cannot do this properly, I just decided it was time for me to get out of the way and let people who could do it properly get involved. I care too much about the game to have my poorly informed opinions and sway it in any way, right?
That's cool. How, if you don't mind me asking, how did you become a playtester? You said you started it. Like, did you approach them? Did you say?
No, they approached me. Robin reached out to me, Robin Credis, and said, we know your show and blah blah blah, and we know you've been involved in the lore and all this, and this is what we're looking for, a group that would do this. Does this sound like something you'd be interested in? And I was like, yes, and here are the people that we should involve in it. And so then we pulled in a group of people that we felt would have involvement there. And then ultimately when I stepped away, I said, here's the guy from the Splinter Mind podcast that is really driving everything now. Like he's making sure we're getting our notes in on time and all this. I go, this is the guy you should put in charge. And I said, thanks. I super appreciated the opportunity and I love it. And I actually have an open invite to go back if I want. I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
And it is time consuming.
Oh, I imagine it would be.
It is incredibly time consuming.
Yeah.
I'd rather focus on the show. I focus on the podcast, focus on playing, that kind of stuff. So
yeah. And it's interesting because it's almost as if you're a playtester, you're a playtester. If you're a YouTuber or a podcaster, that's what you are. You can also be a playtester, but because it takes up so much time.
Yeah, and then you have to be real careful about what you say and don't say, and what's coming. Like I did all playtesting through all the Psychic Awakening stuff, and I'd be on the forum for the Thousand Suns. These guys are like, oh, we're getting everything's terrible for the Thousand Suns, and I'm like, and it hasn't even released yet, right? They're just like, and I'm like, I'm like, it's gonna be freaking amazing, but I can't really say anything, and I just say, I think it's just gonna offer you a lot of opportunities to add character and diversity to your army. Like that's all I can say.
You can just be general.
Yeah.
What's your favorite cult?
That's a tough one.
I like Cult of Time. That's my favorite one.
Cult of Time is awesome and fun to play with. That is the one I have gone to. I would say, Cult of Time's pretty awesome. When I found out that what they were going to do was basically take what were previously known as the what were they called before, like the Pyre and the schools or whatever they called them before. I can't remember off the top of my head. And then they were going to actually, those all evolve into cults in 40K from 30K, and they were going to actually allow you to get different abilities and warlord traits and all those based off of those cults. I was like, this is everything I could have asked for. Like, this is amazing. And so I've played with several of the different ones just to see how they play. It's fun. It's super fun. Anything that offers variety like that, I love.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, what is it? Do they have 9 different cults? I think.
Yeah.
And is it 9 or 6? It's 9.
No, it's not 9.
Yeah.
Numbers each.
That makes sense. Yeah. Like there's so much variety in that. Holy.
Totally. And are some more powerful than others? Yeah, they are.
Time is very powerful.
Time can be very powerful, especially the ability to like bring back units.
That's a big deal. Like that's huge. If you skim over all of them, it's like, oh, that sticks out. Yeah.
But there's some subtlety to some of them that used correctly, they're pretty awesome. But the reality is, people are like, oh, how come everything isn't balanced across the board? Or this spells or this psychic ability is not as balanced as this or as strong as this one. Well, no, it's not, but it's offset by the fact that it's easier to cast, or, you've already cast that one. So now you have limited ones that you can cast. This is an interesting alternative, Yeah.
True.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but one thing I get very frustrated with are when people define definites, right? Like where they say, never take a dreadnought. They're not worth the price.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to disagree with you that I'll never take it. And this is why when people will post a list and they'll be like, oh, here's my list of things that I want to play. What do you think of my list? I'm like, well, how do you intend to play this? Like, what's your objective here with this list? And then we can talk about it. But a lot of times what they'll say is, oh, here's my rubric Marines and this. You should never take those in 5s. Always take them in 10s. It's like, well, okay, but that's not necessarily the case. Like, what's the objective, here? If you're talking tournament play, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. I don't know. I don't play tournaments anymore. I gave up on those a while ago.
Yeah. It's, with Berserkers, I'm thinking how I play Berserkers. I like the smaller units of 5.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go 8 to be fluffy.
Yep.
Rarely 10. It's usually 5. I like a couple units in a Rhino.
Yeah.
Yeah, always chain axes on the Berserkers.
Your Rhinos forward and then hope they survive so they at least get in to kill something.
The Faith and Fury, I don't know if you had a chance to look at that too much, but the World Eaters traits and the stratagems, they've got some pretty good stratagems there for a number of the Chaos Legions, but for World Eaters specifically, I was using some yesterday, and the one that gives you more AP on your attacks, that's a good one, man.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the other one too that it's a Death to the False Emperor on a 5+.
Oh,
Stoke. I think it's called Stoke the Nails, and it's great, especially when Berserkers are attacking.
Yeah.
So that's.
Have you read any of the Siege of Terra series?
No.
Okay. Are you caught up on Horus Heresy?
When you say caught up, do you?
Well, I mean, like, do you kind of know where the general thing of where it's going? I'm not saying you don't have to have read every one, but you're
no. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I got a good general.
The Terra series has the best writing of any of the authors. Like, it's Guy Haley's best book. It's Gab Thorpe's best book. I don't know about Dan Abnett. Dan Abnett writes some good books, but he's the latest one. Your boy Angron features pretty heavily in that one.
Does he?
Oh yeah. You're gonna like it. You're gonna like it.
Because there
was in the third one quite a bit.
He was in the third one, yeah.
So far, yeah.
What was the series called again?
Siege of Terra. So they've kind of ended the Horus Heresy.
Yeah.
And now these final 8 books are the Chaos forces at Terra fighting and trying to kill the Emperor. I mean, we all know how this turns out, right?
Yeah.
Emperor winds up on the Golden Throne. Horus winds up dead. Sanguinius winds up dead. Spoiler alert. I don't know where you've been if you haven't heard that one. But how they get there is going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah. So, oh, yeah. I should. Those are audiobook, right? I should listen to those.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They've actually, I think, just all come out on audiobook too. They're only 3 in so far.
Look at some of the comments on YouTube. They're like, what? They killed him. What?
Sorry. Did I say Sanguinius? I meant Vulcan.
Oh, okay. But he's fine because he's a perpetual.
That's right. What? He's the what?
Well, thank you very much, man, for being my guest today in the Shrine of Chaos.
Thanks for letting me chat with you for a bit, man. I miss you. We haven't seen each other. We were going to see each other at Adepticon.
Yeah. And, that's a whole other can of worms there, right?
Yep.
Fingers crossed.
Hopefully this all cleans up soon and I'll be allowed into your country. And
yeah. I mean, yeah, let's hope that happens. Let's hope this goes back to some sort of normalcy sometime soon.
But we will definitely do our campaign when I come out there.
And thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out the Independent Characters. That's independentcharacters.com. That's your website. Or all of the sites that provide podcasts. iTunes, Spotify. I'm guessing you're on there too.
Yep, all of them.
If you haven't heard of the Independent Characters, check them out. Check you out. Check them out. Is it accurate to say check them out or check you out?
Them. No, it's not just me. I mean,
it's a group of guys, right?
I wouldn't do this alone. I mean, it is my podcast, but I have wrangled in Justin Kiefer, who does painting for CK Studios. He lives down the street from me. We've been friends for years. Adon Tejada, who is a friend of mine as well. He's used to organize events up in Oakland all the time. He's been on the show for a long time. We have Jody Cropholler, who's one of my Santa Cruz buddies. Josh Sawyer, one of my Santa Cruz buddies. They're kind of the regular stable of guys I pull from, but then there's a plethora of other guys that have talent in other areas that we bring in from time to time.
Awesome. And stay tuned next week, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Shrine of Chaos. And also a word from our company who is not sponsoring this episode, Table War.
You're having him on the show, are you? Again?
Shout out to Doug and Todd for
Yep.
all the awesome work they do.
It's so funny.
Yeah, so that's it. Thanks again, man. You're certainly welcome back in the shrine because, after all, you collect chaos.
There you go. It's the best army.
It absolutely is. I agree.
We can say Orcs is, but we really know.
We know who the best one is.
Yeah.
See you guys next time. Happy wargaming.